Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being part of this council meeting today. My name is Dean Reid, I'm the Mayor of the rural city of Wangaratta. Ladies and gentlemen, this public meeting is being recorded to improve access to the meeting for our community. The recording will be published and will be retained by council in accordance with council's legal obligations. As a visitor in the public gallery, your presence may be recorded. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd also like to acknowledge that we're hosting this meeting from the lands of the Bangarang people. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of various lands in which we meet here and work today, and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, we pay our respects. And we also pay our respects to all elders past, present and emerging. Ladies and gentlemen, Almighty God, may we humbly ask Thee to bless and guide this council in its deliberations so that we may truly preserve the welfare of the people for whom we serve. Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll go through the agenda. We have an item here at 12.1, which will be our first item, but before our first major item, which will have some deliberation. But I'd like to go to item number 5 on our contents page, just acceptance and apologies of granting of leave of absence. And I'll go to Councillor Irene Grant first in relation to granting.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'm applying for the leave of absence from the June 15 to July 2nd.
Thank you. June 15 to July 2nd. And I too, Councillor Grant, would also like to put in an absence. I will try to get to a meeting online, but I shall be away from the 21st of June until sometime late in April. Sometime April next year. It's a long time. Sorry, till late in July. I'm not sure of the exact date, but may miss one. Or right, I'm moving that recommendation, that movement. Thank you, and Irene's as well. And you'll second that, will you? That won't be the case, but are you happy? Irene, I'm moving that motion for both of us. Are you seconding that for a grant of leave?
Yes.
Thank you. All those in favour? And that recommendation is carried. We'll move down further and we'll come to the confirmation item of number 7, confirmation of the minutes from the previous meeting. Dave, can you talk to us in relation to that?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I'll move both sets of minutes from the 30th of April and the 6th of May. Just one minor edit for the 30th of April on item 14.1, where we've acknowledged that it's Friday the 1st of June. It should read as Friday the 31st of May. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder for that, please? Yes, Councillor Fitzpatrick? Oh, do you? Sorry. It's all right. Councillor Fitzpatrick gave me the nod. All those in favour? And that is carried. Thank you, Dave. There's no conflict of interest in relation to anything on tonight's meeting. And I don't see any conflicts of interest for anything to do with tonight's meeting. Any councillor? No? Right, okay. Rightio. There's no councillor reports. We'll move straight to executive services, and that will be 12.1. Rescission of motion. I'd just like to hand over to CEO McGrath to partly introduce this.
Thanks, Mayor Rees. This report is dealing with a rescission notice that was lodged by Councillor Herry shortly after our last council meeting. That full rescission notice is attached for people's information. I'll just point out that the way the report actually appears in the agenda does look a little bit misleading. It actually looks like the officers are moving a recommendation to rescind, which is not the case. The report is in the agenda to deal with Councillor Herry's notice of motion, which, as I said, is attached for everyone's consideration.
Thank you, CEO. Councillor Herry, are you right to go? Yep. Rightio. So rescission motion 12.1. Are you happy for me to read the recommend, or are you happy to do it as it's your rescission notice? Oh, sorry. Sorry, do you have a preamble on why this motion is brought to the table first, before I then go to public questions, as per our directors normally do? I'll go to public questions on, yep, before we move in second. I'll go to public questions and/or questions.
Yeah, certainly. So I'll keep the introduction preamble brief. I opted to bring this back to the table with a rescission of a motion to rescind because the vote was taken on a partial cancel. So not everybody was present. It was a full house meeting, and it was a controversial motion, I think it's fair to say. And it was passed on the casting vote of the mayor. So I thought it not unreasonable for it to be, for it to have time to be exposed to the community, have some airing time, and time for people to think about the issues and all the considerations behind it, but also another opportunity to be voted on with all members present, which fortunately all members are present today.
Thank you, Councillor Herring. So, firstly, on this rescission of notice, there are a number of questions that I will read out, and then I'll ask the floor if the floor have any questions. Sometimes when you raise a question, we may not be able to answer it because we haven't voted on it yet. It will come across in the vote on the motion or on the rescission of the motion. So I'll read question number 1, which is Perry Vander Hayden asked the following questions for the council meeting at 3 p.m. on the 28th of May 2024 and is to be addressed during the discussion on the motion, which is notice of motion number 69. My question is any councillor that voted no to the proposed motion hold shares in a solar farm or farms or receiving funding from the solar farm or any solar farms? And that's the first part of that question. I'll go to the second part, but I'll look to the councillors who voted no, which Councillor Bussell, do you have shares?
No shares whatsoever, Mr Mayor, and thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Anything solar items, electric fence, don't think that counts.
Right. Councillor Fuller?
No holdings.
Councillor Herring?
No holdings. And I'm not receiving any benefits from a solar farm. While I am conducting an electrical apprenticeship, I'm not under the employ of any solar farm. I do have a little bit more in the way of solar than Councillor Bussell. I've got solar on my rooftop. That conflicts me.
No. Mike Burston has also asked, sorry, part of this asked the following question for council meeting as well. I'm concerned about the proposal to rescind the notice of motion from Councillor Harvey Benton. If successfully rescinded, it will contribute to state government taking adjudication of solar farm proposals to the detriment of locals. I'd just like to answer that question, that the state government already take control of solar farms and the application process. Unless the solar farm is under 1 megawatt, it is under council's jurisdiction. But what the government has taken away is the right to object to VCAT has also been taken away now by the government, as well as them being the adjudicators of whether solar farms go ahead. The third question, Tom James asked the following questions again for the 28th of May council meeting. Will Councillor Harvey Benton vote against all planning permits to subdivide or build on productive farming land, or is it only solar farms he is against? Will Councillor Benton vote against any planned housing estates around Wangaratta, as this land is also productive farmland and can never be farmed again? Councillor Benton, did you have a response to that?
Yes, Mr Mayor. I find the question a little bit presumptuous, quite frankly, because under the Local Government Act, I'm not going to be in contempt of the Local Government Act, and I'll judge every decision making that comes up across this table by its merits. So until decisions come in or the recommendations come in, that's where it sits.
Thank you. Renee Bergman asked the following question for council meeting today. What sustainable energy will you look at, if not solar? Nuclear, wind, hydro, because coal and gas won't last forever when our children are adults. Also, how does a farmer make money off the land without a feedlot or a dairy? Without one or the other, you need a second income to support a farm costs, which means you or your partner, yourself, need to be working full time off the farm to help run the farm. It's not profitable to only run animals as there is limited food and that costs money too. Well, council's role is in decision making about the form of sustainable energy generations that takes place, and its location is very limited. Recent changes made by the state government to planning processes for such facility removes council's and our community's ability to challenge the minister for planning decisions about these facilities at VCAT. The notice of motion is about these changes. We acknowledge many farmers in our municipality have off-farm income. We also note that many farmers in our municipality work on their farms 100% and don't have to have a feedlot or a dairy to make good money. Thank you. Now, that's all the written questions that have come into council. Are there any questions from the floor? If there is, I ask you to come forward, press the little speaking voice on the microphone in front and ask your question. Please say your name and ask your question. Are there any questions from the gallery? No. Thank you, John. Can you just come forward, push that little,
Which one?
the voice, the face? Yep, that's it. And say your name.
Hi everyone, I'm John Conroy. Sit down here. So I would just like to ask Jack, Councillor Jack Herring, I just heard Dan state at the start of the meeting that he's here to preserve the rights of the people. That's, yep.
Yes, that's what I said.
Yep. And their welfare. So it's not that that Dan's trying to shut down solar farms. It is that he's wanting to give people the chance to defend what their thought process is and you know, attack state government through VCAT or you know get a fair outcome out of the third party. Is that right? Yep. So
Correct, that's exactly what we're trying to do.
yeah.
In the notice of motion, you're asking that we're trying to protect the rights of the public to be able to object to a solar farm, to anything, and to take away those VCAT rights is what the notice of motion Councillor Benton brought forward, is to help protect the rights of
So
that.
we're not objecting to solar farms in the municipality, we're just
Nope.
trying to defend the right of people to be able to go to VCAT and put their case forward as a third party adjudicator, basically.
Correct, which will hopefully get better outcomes.
Yep.
Correct.
Right.
So your question to Jack is, does he not want the rights of a third party?
Well, if he's a councillor and you stated at the start of the meeting and that you're here to preserve the welfare of the community, and why would they not have the chance to go to VCAT? I just don't see it's fair to be taken away.
Yep. Jack, do you have a response to that?
I would start by saying that the community, I would not see the community at writ large as just the proponents or opponents in a case at VCAT. So there's a broader community to consider. It's not just the people that are directly involved at a case of VCAT. So a solar farm obviously has a relationship, renewable energy generation facilities have a relationship with the whole community, and I don't think we can forget that. I mean, just to illustrate that point, if only with the community benefit sharing and revenue streams and that concept alone, it's a matter for the whole community. So,
And if the third party finds that, you know, that's the benefit, well, I'm sure they'll award that way, but why should people not have the right to go to the third party?
Yep, so, okay, ultimately, I guess that leads to another consideration, which is ultimately, we can't forget about the reason why these appeal processes may have been curtailed. I think they were curtailed for a couple of reasons. One, because there is a certain time consideration and an urgency for transitioning energy sources, energy being an absolutely critical, fundamental aspect of our society. So there's an urgency around that and how we navigate that. Not easy to do, not easy to do in short time frames. As many people say, it would have been good if we had started a lot harder and faster 10, years ago, 15 years ago. And I think that the processes have sometimes led to really long, protracted delays. And as you would understand, any industry, any transition, there needs to be certainty. We've got significant amounts of investment, assets, large players involved. There needs to be clarity in the direction that things are heading. So I think it's really important context to consider. Look at housing, and someone raised housing in the question before. It's a critical, fundamental good of value to society. The same thing has been done with housing, the removal or providing the opportunity for people to go through expedited processes where appeal processes are removed, because we recognise there's a high need for housing in our society, and we recognise the critical value of that. So, I mean, it's one and the same to me, like energy, housing. So, if you're making the argument that there should never be exemption to these processes, well, then why would you not apply that across the board and apply it to housing as well? And why would this council not put a motion forward that says that no, there will be an appeal, a VCAT appeal process for everything? You know, it's a bigger thing that we have to juggle as a whole community. That's not just Wangaratta, that's also part of a bigger society. It's not just Victoria, Australia, global, etc. You have to.
Everyone else's business is subject to rules and regulations and having to go through council and permits, and you know, they all get drawn out too, don't they? So
yeah, certainly, and I've heard many voices often talk about getting rid of more red tape as much as we can, and you know, that's been in different contexts.
in fact, the large factor is the people who are coming to invest in, you know, so in any community, they're coming in, most of the money is coming from overseas, 80%, I believe. They're coming in and they do not care about the communities. They don't live there. They haven't made their money, you know, and from that community, and you know, they don't live in the community, and they're not part of it, and they're just coming to financially benefit from it, and that's it. From government subsidies and you know, and the financial income from the energy production, but why can they have such a right, and you know, and local people who make up that community and you know, have developed it have no right?
I'll just make one last point.
Jack, I'll just get you to make one last point.
The last
I'm not going to have a
point,
debate between
okay.
back and forth, so we'll then move on to the recommendation.
The last point is that I don't see VCAT as the only opportunity for all stakeholders to have significant input. There are engagement processes around these things. It's not just a binary VCAT. You get an opportunity to have input and influence, or no VCAT appeal, and therefore you're completely silenced, and there's no opportunity to engage in these processes.
All right, thanks John. John, could you flip that button on the thing again? Cheers, thank you. If there's no other questions from the gallery, we'll get Jack to bring the motion forward of the rescission. Jack, are you happy to read the motion forward for that rescission?
Yeah, would you? Yeah, I'll just read point one. Yes. So I'll move the motion that council rescind the council resolution at the that was passed at the 30th April 2024 scheduled council meeting relating to item at 19.1 of that meeting's agenda.
Okay, so I'll just go, thank you Jack as the mover, and I'll ask for a seconder. I'll just read the recommendation, or the notice of motion number 69, that Councillor Harvey Benton presented a notice of motion on the 30th of April, and it was that the Rural City of Wangaratta Council develop a resource and advocacy action plan, as a matter of urgency to appeal the current legislation which limits the community's ability to contest a planning decision to the Victorian Civil Administrative Tribunal, otherwise known as VCAT, if I say that again, And number two on that notice number 69, notice of motion, was that the Rural City of Wangaratta Council asks the state government to support the protection of agricultural land for food, fibre, viticulture production, as any significant change to our rural landscape will have adverse impacts economically, socially, environmentally across the whole municipality. The action plan would be communicated to and support sought from all political representatives, peak industry bodies and government agencies. Peak local government bodies and agencies would also be lobbied for their support. And Jack's notice to rescission, I'll go to, is there a seconder for that notice of motion?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I second.
Thank you, Councillor Bussell. Councillor Herry, as the mover of the motion, you have a 5-minute period to talk on that.
Thank you, Mayor Rees. Look, so I mean, I think everyone was present except Councillor Fitzpatrick at the last meeting and heard the discussion on that. So I'll try not to go over those points too much, but and I did cover some of it with the question of John Conroy just then. But ultimately, this original motion contained a number of blatant errors, I would say, statements, misstatements. For example, that renewable energy generation facilities are going to be an irreversible destruction of agricultural land. That's just a misstatement or a falsehood. That is not true. This is utilisation of agricultural land for a purpose, for a period of time. These projects have different contracts and stuff, but there are clauses in them about returning land to an original productive state. If that's a concern, then perhaps that could be part of a motion that looks to advocate for tighter constraints or tighter writing up of contracts around that aspect to ensure that there is absolutely high confidence that the land will be returned. That it's a loss of agricultural land during these facilities being in operation. Well, look, sometimes it is if a facility is not necessarily extracting an agricultural benefit simultaneous to energy generation. However, there are lots of examples, or a number of examples, and the number is increasing, of facilities that are simultaneously running agricultural operations to extract more value from the land. I just see it as an opportunity to get more value out of that land for our communities. So if that's the real key consideration, that we're losing agricultural productivity, then why don't we instead advocate for higher stringent requirements of simultaneous utilisation of land, or maximising the utilisation of land? Why don't we have stronger disincentives for agricultural land that's just left doing nothing for whatever reason? Like, the logic, that doesn't quite sit well with me. And I did make the point that ultimately it's not VCAT appeals are not the only opportunity for stakeholders to have input into these proposals. The engagement requirements were elevated. I think it was around the same time that the appeal process was removed. The upfront engagement requirements are quite high. The upfront kind of community benefit sharing guidance material that structures the conversations around the community at large, and I'm talking about the whole community, how it can benefit from these facilities being within its municipal boundaries. And we talked about the payment in lieu of rates at the last discussion. But the notice of motion that was put on the table paints it as if there is absolutely nil benefit for our community, and it's all disbenefits. So I think that's very misleading. So ultimately, based on the fact that I think there's issues with the original notice of motion, factual issues. I also think that rather than be blockers that are just putting up support for processes to be in place that might delay and stall these facilities going ahead, why don't we instead position this ourselves as a positive force that's trying to encourage better facilities or better extraction of benefits from these facilities. Why don't we, if agricultural utilisation is our consideration, is our concern, why doesn't this council make submissions to all of the planning applications that do come through? Why don't we make that commitment so that we're encouraging maximum agricultural utilisation? Why don't we create an advocacy plan that is about advocating for improved community benefits, for improved agriculture, for improved confidence that these lands are going to be returned to their original state? I just don't understand why we would put up such a negative, throw up roadblocks and negatively framed motion around a critical issue such as an energy transition. I'll leave it there, man. Thanks.
Great timing. Thank you, Jack. Councillor Bustle, did you want to add to, as the seconder and getting it onto the table, did you want to add?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's a very interesting conversation that we have, although it's mostly outside council's scope. I think it's healthy to have a good discussion. I opposed the original motion because I don't think it was the finest document I've ever seen, and I'd rather see it rewritten. I think that would do the document a fair bit of good. So that's about all I've got to say, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, councillor. Any other councillor like to talk on the recommendation, or sorry, on the rescission of notice of motion 69? Councillor Grant.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I will say that I believe that the rescission motion has missed the point of the original motion. And I'm going to continue to support the motion. And it's not a document, it is a motion, and a document will emerge from the motion should it be passed. And as I said, I will continue to support the motion passed at the last monthly meeting, as I believe it appropriately reflects the concerns of the rural city of Wangaratta with regard to the erosion of planning responsibilities. And that's the key of the motion, I believe. And the lack of overview of land that will potentially be taken up by solar or wind. And that's another part of the concern that I have, that we're having our planning rights eroded as a council, and we have no real say in what the future will look like for our community, and I think that's important. As I've stated, and I need to state it again, I'm certainly not opposed to renewable energy. We all want to see clean, renewable and reliable, sustainable energy. But we also need to be aware of what these changes will look like. You can't just sit back and imagine blithely it's all going to work out 100% for all of us. And I have to question the statement earlier that that there's been an engagement process, or there will be an engagement process that will allow us to have a say in that, because to me at the moment there isn't anything that's clear or transparent in terms of that engagement process. By taking away our planning responsibilities and removing the right to go to VCAT, there is now potential to change the landscape forever, and not necessarily in a positive or productive way. And while there is urgency, and that's part of the problem, that there is this urgency that we need to get things done very, very quickly. I believe we need to be both clear-eyed and cautious about what will happen, and what we as a council have oversight of in our community. So, as I said, Mr Mayor, I absolutely support the original motion, and I think the intention of the original motion was to demonstrate the rural city of Wangaratta's concern about what was happening in our own backyard, and something that we were going to have very little control over.
Thank you, Councillor Grant.
Mayor, yes, if I could, just respond to a couple of those points.
No.
No?
You've got your chance to respond at the end, and I'm very happy for your 2-minute response at the end in rebuttal. Councillor Benton.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just to correct a couple of things in relationship, there was no mention in the original motion about renewable energies, and I will say it was the catalyst that probably brought to my attention that there had to be a line drawn in the sand. Over my lifetime, this is probably the third time I've seen where a appeal process has been taken away from the people, and one was in local government. Rightly or wrongly, it was taken away. That government fell very heavily on its sword later on. The other thing that was just mentioned previously is in relationship to having a plan for agriculture. Well, this is what's going to happen out of an action plan. We haven't said what's actually going to be in that action plan. It's to be evolved and be resourced to be evolved. But the main principle of this thing is to have the liberties that we all have, is to be able to go to VCAT. I personally have been through, not VCAT, but through a court system to get compensation over a freeway going through. It's not a very pleasant experience, and I don't think people are going to just go to VCAT to be mischievous, to make sure that you're going to delay the process. And that probably one of those, Councillor Grant said, one of the greatest things, the bugbears with this renewable energy thing is the 2050. We've got to get there. High or low water, we've got to get there. And I think it's going to divide communities and damage where we're going in relationship to energy in the full context, because we're still going to have all abilities to be to produce energy. It's ironical though, the very process that we're going through at this present time in this chamber is exactly what we are trying to ensure that the community goes through. The ability to have a rescission motion is we're having a look at it again. The same thing is why I'm asking for this council to be able to get the government to change its mind so they can, for the community, have a look at it, every proposal, not just in relationship to renewables, but there is coming down the track, it's already been mentioned in relation to housing. It might be all right, but social housing, and we haven't got the right ability to appeal that either. Where do we go if we just don't have some sort of pushback and make sure that they are doing the right thing for the community? Or we just keep going, steady she goes, straight into the rocks? Is that where we're going to get up? Is democracy? Because this is the very fundamentals of democracy we're talking about here today. And I think the rescission motion is that, in principle, the same thing that we're asking for. So I find it rather hypocritical what we're going for in the rescission motion. So therefore I won't be supporting the rescission motion.
Thank you, Councillor Benton. Councillor Fuller, did you want to talk on the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Whilst I didn't support the original motion in that it was perhaps too refined to a preamble around renewables, I also think that perhaps we could have aimed at actually bringing it back to us rather than to VCAT being the focus potentially. I do, however, feel that what was decided at that time was decided at that time, and I don't feel comfortable potentially overturning that at this point. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. I'll just end off before I hand over to Councillor Herry. As the mover of the motion, he gets to end the debate between councillors. I'd just like to state that make no mistakes, ladies and gentlemen, in the audience and abroad. This is the government taking away, slowly but surely, our rights. The government are doing it more often. And I can see, and I've said it before, in 10 to 15 years' time, you won't see any of us here. It will all be run by an organisation that will make decisions that will come from the state. I want these rights. I can understand what Jack is saying, that the VCAT process can slow a development up and the use of solar energy by a long time. I remember that from his previous talking at the motion. If we want to get things sped up, let's speed up the VCAT process. Get the government to employ more people to have greater detail in VCAT to get decisions made quicker and better outcomes that way. So I won't be supporting the rescission notice. I'll be supporting the previous notice of motion number 69 that Councillor Benton put forward, and I urge all my councillors to support that. Councillor Herry, to end off.
Yeah, I would disagree. I'd say if we want to speed things up, let's be more specific about what we want. And that's kind of my whole point why I want this council put forward a motion that's more specific about what it wants, the positives that it wants to extract out of these things, rather than just say, no, we're not happy, we want more appeal processes, which have been causing unacceptable delays, but no, we're happy just to have those put back into place and advocate for there being those roadblock blocks put back in. What we need to do is be specific about what we as a community, the positives we want to extract from this new opportunity, renewable energy opportunity, and take that forth. Another point, Councillor Grant raised that our planning rights are being eroded as decision makers. That's not what this is about. We're not making decisions about renewable energy generation facilities. No, yeah, but it's not about our planning, our authority as a planning decision maker, ultimately.
Oh, we won't debate back and forward. Jack's got the last chance to talk.
And finally, I just think if we don't think bigger picture and think about what we want to get out of it and think about going forward and extracting benefits from this opportunity, I mean, how do you think we're going to get anywhere as a society? Like 50 years ago, how do you think the high voltage transmission lines got put anywhere? You know, if everything was a situation of individuals directly in proximity to those transmission lines, having ultimate kind of clout and authority over something which is a whole of society consideration and decision. So I think I'll just leave it there.
Good. Thank you. So my fellow councillors, I'll put the notice of rescission to the vote. All those in favour of the notice of rescission? All those against? And the notice has lapsed. Lapsed. Thank you. We'll move on.
Now it's call a division.
Call a division?
Yes.
Absolutely. So division, all those in favour? Councillor Bussell and Councillor Herry. All those against? Councillor Fitzpatrick, Councillor Grant, Councillor Fuller, Councillor Benson, Councillor Rees. Thank you. Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. If anybody was here for that notice of motion that didn't get up, if you want to stay, please stay and watch the rest of the meeting, but you can go. And we'll continue on with the rest of the council meeting. Thank you. Okay, item 13.1 is the audit and risk independent member remuneration. And I'll go straight to Juan Hernandez.
The report's presented to council to endorse a remuneration increase of 2.5 for each independent member of the Audit and Risk Committee. Under the committee's charter, a review of the levels of remuneration for independent members is to be conducted annually. The last review took place April 2023.
Thank you, Juan. Can I have a mover for that one, please? Councillor Grant, and seconder, please. Councillor Benson. Councillor Grant, did you want to talk on the recommendation?
Only to say that they deserve every penny that they get.
Thank you. Any other councillor like to talk on the recommendation? I'll talk on it quickly first as part of the Audit and Risk Committee, as a council standing on that. Sorry, is there any questions from the gallery on that one? Didn't think so. And as I'm on that committee with Councillor Herry, I know Councillor Bustle has been on it for many years as well, and we all look at the work that the Audit and Risk Committee do, and it is astronomical, the reading and the thoughts behind it, so this slight increase still certainly doesn't meet what they do, so I'm fully supportive. If there's no other councillor like to talk, Councillor Grant, you didn't want to say anything to finish off as the mover, I'll put the recommendation to vote. All those in favour, and the recommendation is carried. We'll move on to now is to 13.2, which is the September Council schedule meeting date change, and one.
The report's presented to council to change the date of the September scheduled meeting to Monday, 16th September. Council resolved that the March 2024 scheduled meeting to bring the September 2024 scheduled council meeting forward 1 week to ensure all council reports and business could be adopted by the caretaker period. Since that time, the Victorian Electoral Commission has subsequently confirmed that the caretaker period will now come into effect Tuesday, 17th September.
Lovely, thank you. Can I have a mover for that? Councillor Fuller, second to Councillor Fitzpatrick. Councillor Fuller, any questions from the gallery on that? Didn't think so. Councillor Fuller.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just noting in there that it's the Borman location.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. Councillor Fitzpatrick, anything to add? No. Any other councillor like to talk on that? No. Put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour, and the recommendation is carried. We'll move on to sustainability and culture, and 15.1 is the road deviation and land exchange at the Old Hume Highway, Glenrowan. I'll hand over to Director Swart for a quick introduction.
Thank you. This report's of an administrative nature. It's about the statutory process to undertake a road deviation and a land exchange relating to the subdivision of land at 246 Old Hume Highway, Glenrowan. The road deviation and associated land exchange are needed to accommodate an existing dwelling constructed partly in a road reserve prior to the subdivision of the land. The report seeks Council's approval to enter into an agreement with the relevant landowner regarding the proposed road deviation and land exchange, commence the statutory processes to consider carrying out the road deviation and land exchange, and advertise and invite public submissions on the proposal.
Thank you. Can I have a mover for the recommendation? Councillor Bustle, you'll move it. Second to Councillor Fuller. Councillor Benton, Bustle, did you want to talk on that?
There's not much to say here, Mr. Mayor. A bit of housekeeping. It's not the only building we have in Worcester Wangrad. It's on a road reserve that I'm aware of, and it's good to see it being tied up.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fuller, anything from you? Yeah, I'd just like to repeat that. This is just a clean-up of an anomaly that happened many years back, and good to see that we're clearing up for future owners of those properties. Any other councillor like to talk? No? I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? And the recommendation is carried. Director Swart, is 15.2 is report for noting of the procurement exemptions for development contribution plan project, please.
Thank you. This report notifies Council that the Chief Executive Officer has approved an exemption from the public tender requirements of Council's procurement policy for an upgrade of a section of Christensen's Lane, which is part of our Northwest Growth Area. That work is being done in lieu of the required contributions under the Development Contribution Plan, otherwise known as Works in Kind. The works are required by the Development Contribution Plan and will be delivered using available development contribution credits. No council funding is involved. Council's procurement policy requires a report to be presented to Council for noting when an exemption of this nature is approved. And the report also notes that it's likely that similar circumstances will reoccur in the future, and that we will be looking to add a specific exemption for this purpose in Council's procurement policy when it's next reviewed.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the gallery on this issue? Can I look for a mover of the recommendation? Councillor Grant and Councillor Bustle. Councillor Grant, did you have anything to say on this as the mover?
Well, I need to say that I'm pleased that we're starting to refine the whole process around developer contributions, because often if they're not a clear process, then it's something that will come back to bite us at some point in the future. So I'm pleased to see that this is part of the consideration now.
Yes. Thank you, Councillor Buswell. Nothing. Any other councillor? No, I'd like to agree with Councillor Grant on that, and to change that procurement policy in the future will just speed a process up to be able to use existing developers to be able to do works in kind, to move along developments a lot faster, and rather than completing works and then council having to get money back off them to come back and do works that could have been done in that same process. So I look forward to everyone agreeing with that. Councillor Grant again is the mover. Anything to finish? No. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour, and the recommendation is carried. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that moves through our meeting now to public question time. And I do have a public question, and this is from Dorothy Fox. I asked the following question to be submitted at 3 p.m. on the 28th of May 2024, and the question will be addressed as public question time. The question one is, as an idea came to mind of the significance and importance of being proud of our town for various reasons, would our council consider placing our national flag only in prominent positions, of which I recommend 4, and these are examples: northbound roundabout at Murphy/Faithful Street, southbound roundabout Murphy and Ford Street, Snow Road roundabout at Oxley, and 4, strongly recommend the very busy intersection between the Wangaratta High School and Galen College. These positions would give many people a constant feeling of pride and also emotional impact on a day the flag would be at half-mast for various reasons. Our country is experiencing very troubled times, and hence the importance of knowing what we stand for must never be lost. And I thank you, Dot, for your suggestion, your request. We'll need council consideration as well as a funding allocation. So we'll treat your request, your email, as a budget submission, and you're very happy to, if you're happy to speak to a budget submission at the time that budget submissions are due, you can please get in touch with our services team. We'll be able to schedule a time slot for this during a hearing, a budget submission on the 11th of June it was. Otherwise it will be treated as a budget submission in writing for council and corporate management team consideration at that time. So thank you. Are there any other questions from the gallery? Very happy for people to come forward. Steve, you'd have a couple of questions before the end of the meeting, wouldn't you?
I won't ask during the meeting.
Right, mate. If there's no further questions tonight, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being part of this council meeting. Again, to Jess and Zoe up the back for doing a great job. Thank you for being here and being part of it. Ladies and gentlemen, have a great afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you at next month's